John Olivier here, your host of Serious and Silliness Outcast and Serious and Silliness Bodybuilding. We have a great new sponsor, Jersey Alternative Medicine, Anti-Aging and Hormone Replacement Clinic. Just go to the website, njaltmeds.com. That's njaltmeds.com. Or you give them a call at 609-977-2981. So what do? They actually offer a variety of services like TRT replacement, medical weight loss, female sexual health, male sexual health, injectable peptides, anti-aging treatment. And this is all under the eyes of an actual physician. You fill out an intake form. You go over symptoms with a clinician, and they will customize medication that you could take. And the best part is it's prescribed by a physician and it is delivered to your doorstep in all 50 states. You don't even have to leave the comfort of your home. That is njaltmeds.com, 609-977-2981. Go to Jersey Alternative Medicine now and get healthy. All right. Serious and Silliness Outcast. Our guest is back, Gabe Morales, former prison guard and counselor, and today successful author. We'll be discussing the Mexican Mafia, and here's his book, The History of the Mexican Mafia, La M. And we can get this on Amazon. You can also get his other book, The History of the Aryan Brotherhood, on Amazon. Both of these will be in the description area in our the link in the description area. Sorry, I'm fumbling today. Both of them will be in the link in the description area. Let me just plug our two sponsors first before we start about the history of the Mexican Mafia. This should be a good one. First sponsor is Beer League Warriors Apparel. Great workout gear. Support small business. Don't buy from Nike. Don't buy from Adidas this week. Go to Beer League Warriors Apparel on Instagram. The link will be in the description. Great clothing for the gym, great clothing to work out or hang out, good quality and good prices. The other one is Jersey Alternative Medicine, anti-aging hormone replacement. If you're feeling shitty, if you're feeling crappy, if you have a terrible sex drive, if you just want to get your blood work done, all of this is seen through a physician. So please contact them. They serve nationwide. njaltmeds.com. 609-977-2981. That's njaltmeds.com, 609-977-2981. All right, Mr. Morales, here we go. I did a little bit of research and a little bit of reading of your book about the history of the Mexican Mafia. And what's so funny is I also watched an interview of the actor, Danny Trejo, who had a lot to say about the Mexican Mafia. I believe that was on Vlad TV. It was a great interview. I only knew him as an actor. But I wanted to talk to you about the beginnings because there's some sources say they started in 1957. Other sources say they started in the early 60s. So how did they actually get started?
Well, it is true they did start in 1957. There's a
Mm-hmm.
guy named Louis Bluff Flores. What a Bluff Flores. He was a kid from Hawaiian Gardens, it's a barrio in southeast LA County, and he decided to get together with some other Mexican American youth in the California Youth Authority. Uh, and at that time, they housed a lot of the rejects from California Youth Authority at the Dual Vocational Institute, which was a adult facility, but they also had a juvenile section. Um, so they got together there. That's where it's traced to. But you think of any organization. I've started several organizations from the ground up. It you just don't say, "Hey, let's start this," and then the next day it starts. So it took off slowly.
Okay.
He uh, he had a homeboy, Alex Honda Lechuga, who was from the same neighborhood. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
those two talked about it. Then they talked maybe with a third person. Um, then a couple weeks later, they talked to a fourth person.
Right.
So this is, it takes a while. to convince people into an idea. You think of any idea you're trying to start a new business, even it doesn't just start happening overnight.
I see.
It takes some work,
Okay.
and some convincing. And so I'm sure that I'm sure the same thing happened with the Mexican Mafia. I've actually looked at the some of the original founding members, um, and there was about a dozen or so. Some people
Hmm.
say 13, but that has really nothing to do with the 13 symbol that their farm group, the Serranos, or support group, the Serranos, used later on. We'll talk
The
about
number
that just
third,
here.
the number 13 seems to be very popular within organized crime with biker clubs
Yeah,
and
yeah. Yeah. It wasn't just the Mexican mafia using that. It used to mean marijuana. You know, marijuana, the bike for the bikers, motorcycles. Mamas, money. I mean, the number 13. I remember that in the 70s.
mm,
Them selling little patches. You could buy patches at the swap meets and stuff.
that's right.
The
Yeah.
13, and sometimes they'd have the marijuana leaf. Sometimes it just have 13. But anyways, so the number to me really isn't important. Some people seem to make that a bigger deal than others. But I looked. What I was going to say is I looked at the reception dates of some of the original guys, and a lot of them didn't get into the system until 1958, 1959. Uh, Cheyenne Cadena, which the movie American Me, um, if any of your viewers have seen that, I'm sure quite a few of them have, starring Edwards James Olmos as the character Santana. The real guy was uh, Cheyenne Cadena, Rodolfo Cheyenne Cadena, and he was out of Bakersfield, um, but was very close to a gang called Primera Flats from East LA. So that's when in the movie you see them say La Primera es we don't fake it, we just take it. So they played a lot with that movie. Almost played a lot with reality there, and he got in trouble for it. Changed some things, but the real guy Shane Cadena, I believe he entered uh, the California Department of Corrections at the end of 59, maybe even the first part of 1960. So
Mm.
that's when they started really taking off. Shane
Ah,
Cadena was uh, instrumental in the Mexican Mafia kind of going to the next level. He's very intelligent, very smart. Um, I actually know Tony Casas was an advisor to Olmos. He didn't take his advice, unfortunately, but to that movie American Me about the Mexican Mafia, and Tony Casas worked very closely with some of the main guys as far as monitoring them, and he actually worked with Cheyenne Cadena and would take him to different programs to try to defuse some of the violence that was going on in the system at that time. So he said, "Man, this guy he could have been a doctor probably, you know."
really?
And I also remember him saying that he took him out one time I believe he took him out from Chino prison. Cheyenne Cadena was there at that time before his death. And so this would have been probably late 1960s, maybe early 70s. And he took him out unchained. And the guards were like, "Do you know how many guys this guy's killed and had killed? Are you crazy?" And he goes, "Hey, we're going to go to work. We're going to do some work here." And he took them out in his car, and they were going all over the grapevine for people who know LA, going over the Tejon Pass. And they were talking, and Tony asked Cheyenne, "So what shall we do now?" And Cheyenne said, "Well, I can kill you, or you could kill me, or we could just get along." The ride went smoothly. But I mean, he knew this. He did know. People were like, "Do you know what this guy is about? How ruthless this guy is?" He knew very much. He knew all about him.
Mm.
Probably better than anybody but his family. Anyway, so I talked to Tony Casas and other people that dealt with some of these original guys. My mentor, Robert Mocha, rest in peace, arrested Joe Morgan, the Godfather, or honorary godfather, better said, of the Mexican Mafia, who was a white guy from
Yeah.
East LA. He didn't
Joe
join
Pegleg, right? Joe
until
Pegleg
late.
Morgan.
Right. Yeah. Nobody ever called him Peg Leg to his face, but yeah, that's what a lot of the people did. The cops would say
That's
because he had a
always the
wooden
case.
leg.
That's so funny.
Yeah. 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 They show respect. I mean, uh, there was an old commercial. E.F. Hutton when E.F. Hutton talks, people listen, and everybody kind of pauses.
Mhm.
That's something my mentor Mocha would state a lot. And when Joe Morgan spoke, he had everybody's attention and everybody's respect.
How did he
And
become such a shot caller in the Mexican Mafia if he was white?
well, that's a good question. He was not original. A lot of people think that he was one of the original guys. He wasn't. He didn't join until the late '60s.
Hmm.
But Joe Morgan, he was convicted of a murder of his lover's husband when he was a young man, just a teenager. And I believe he was the youngest prisoner ever sent to San Quentin prison. And he was involved in numerous jail escapes from LA County Jail, uh, just numerous. He was a legend already. He was very close to the Italian mafia. He had friends in the Aryan Brotherhood. Eddie Bunker, who was an associate, not a member, but very well known um, individual. Uh, he was good friends with him. Um, so he didn't need to join the Mexican mafia, but he had so much clout with the drug cartels down in Mexico. Uh, they wanted to recruit him. So they got him in the late 60s, and they took it up another notch when
Mm.
he joined. And so Cheyenne Cadena and Joe Morgan were instrumental in moving the Mexican mafia out to the streets. So they formed, like I said, 1957 as a nucleus, expanded by the 1960s. They had early 60s, they had some murders under their belt and pretty much had control of the yard for the Chicano prisoners, for the Mexican
Mm.
prisoners. But nobody else messed with them either. The whites, the blacks, pretty much it was the Mexican mafia running the yards.
Mm.
And so then they had, like all groups, you had some dissenters. They ended up being the West Familia Mexicana, the NFM prison gang, today known as just the West Familia. But they got into some disagreements and murders between them and attempted homicides of members and associates. And so that became a huge thing too, as far as politics in California. And for our viewers, if you remember in that movie American Me, they show Cheyenne Cadena almost getting stabbed and thrown over the tier.
Yeah, that's right. Great movie, by the way. Yeah.
The real guy Cheyenne Cadena was killed just like that.
Really?
However, it wasn't the Mexican Mafia that did that. It was the North Familia, the other side. So, like I said, he played with some historical facts,
Mm.
and he paid a price for it. The MA and Danny Trejo, you mentioned him, talks about it. They put a hit out on Almost
I've
for
heard.
some of the discrepancies he had in that movie.
And Danny Trejo claims that he saved his life.
Yeah, he had a big part of it. Yeah, yeah, he was a big part of it. Because Danny Trejo was not an MMA member, but he was an associate. He was a boxer. That's kind of how he stayed out of it. But he knew them all. He knew them all. He was well respected, Danny Trejo, at Folsom and San Quentin.
Hmm.
And so, yeah. So, anyways, that's all kind of part of that evolution of the Mexican Mafia, bringing it from 1957 to 1972, December 1972, when Cheyenne Cadena was killed and thrown off the tier.
Mm.
That was kind of like I like to say it as their major growth, major power period. But after that time period, throughout the 70s, they expanded even more out to the streets, especially as they started letting a lot of these convicts out due to reforms in criminal law, kind of like what's happened lately. And you saw a
Mm.
surge in crimes on the street, just like what happened post
Yeah.
COVID. It's
Right.
so weird how history repeats itself. We don't.
Yeah.
I don't believe we learn from history. I just don't.
No, we don't.
I
Well,
don't think so.
I think
We
we're,
have the same mindset.
I think we're destined to be extinct. To be honest with you.
Yeah, you know, I was joking with my wife the other day. I think we're turning back in Neanderthals. You know,
Yeah,
it's
it's
just we're going in
unbelievable.
reverse as far as evolution. Yeah, you know, because we're doing some really dumb things. But anyway, so crime out in the streets with the Mexican Mafia increased substantially during the 70s. This continued through the 1980s. Their power inside and out continued to grow. And I was there. You know, I knew about the Mexican Mafia. I think I told you, I'm not sure, last time I talked about my background a little bit.
Hmm.
My 21st birthday party was crashed by two Mexican Mafia members and two associates
Really?
who were working for the head guy in Washington State for the Mexican Mafia, Jimmy
Okay.
Joe Lucero. So, you know, I encountered them in the late 70s, early 80s um, on the streets. I visited some in prison
Mm.
when I was a youngster, going with some of these they call them pinto convict self self help groups. Let me get that
Okay.
out. And they would have outsiders come visit them in prison. So I was astounded one time when one of the program these are rehab guys supposedly. One of the drug rehab guys goes to the bathroom, pulls some heroin out of his ass. They all shoot up there at Walla Walla prison. These are all
Jesus.
Mexican Mafia members and associates. And I freaked out because I'm in the room with them.
Right.
In the guards at that time, they had inmate government, and the convicts ran Washington State Prison.
Okay.
Anybody interested? You could read a book called Concrete Mama. Talks all about it and how you know, that was a crazy experiment. And I think we're kind of doing that again here today with you know the way they're wanting to do San Quentin and the Norwegian model and stuff. It's just this is not this is not a
It's not going to work.
Scandinavian
Yeah.
country exactly.
It's
It's
not going to work.
we have different dynamics. I really don't understand some of these politicians. Just blows my mind.
Oh, please,
But
you and me both. Let
yeah,
me
here we
ask
go
you.
again.
Let me take you back a little bit. When the head of the Mexican Mafia was killed in prison, knifed to death, and then thrown over the balcony, he was killed by a separate faction that you said from the Mexican Mafia, right? They had differences and they split. Why did they target him? Why did they go after him? Why did they kill him?
Well, he had Chankarena, like I said, he was very intelligent. He actually came up with the concept that both factions, the Nuestra Familia Mexicana and the Mexican Mafia, would have representatives, equal representatives, six from each side,
Mm,
to talk with the administration so they could basically work out some of the differences. They had a temporary truce after a major incident called the Shoe War in San Quentin, September 1968. Major incident. And they had some other incidents that happened at other institutions that rekindled that feud. And the California Department of Corrections, including Tony Casas, the guy I mentioned before, was very much in favor of having these guys work things out.
mm,
So they had peace talks, basically. Well, they decided that the North Familia Mexicana decided that Chancarena had betrayed them because the Mexican Mafia attacked some of their members, North Familia members at other institutions. And so they felt, well, you know, there's no such thing as a truce. This guy, you know, promised us that, you know, hey, we could all have our own institutions, we could all have our own representatives. He promised all this stuff. He's supposed to be the leader, and it ain't working out that way. So they killed him to make an example of him.
wow.
He was, see, in the Mexican mafia, there's no true leader. Shankarina was not the only leader. He was considered one of the shot callers, the main leaders.
Mm,
Mexican Mafia is set up a little different. In West Familia, they have generals, captains, lieutenants,
Right.
soldiers. Um,
Was there any
uh,
retaliation when he was killed?
oh yeah,
Okay.
lots. Yeah, it broke out crazy at that time, and not just in prisons, in jails, but out in the streets too. So yeah, it was off the hook during the 1970s. Then they locked them all down. I think I mentioned that in the last episode on the Aryan Brotherhood. Late
Mm,
70s, they started validating and locking down these prison gang members to security housing units. In that, the violence slowly subsided. When I was at Folsom in the late 80s, early 90s,
mm,
there were still some riots kicking off between the NF side and the Mexican Mafia, between the Sureños, which are the support group I mentioned of the
mm,
Mexican Mafia, and the Norteños. Mexican Mafia primarily recruits from Southern California, but not exclusively. The Nuestra Familia almost exclusively recruits from Northern California,
okay.
and now even in other states. Same thing with the Mexican Mafia. They occasionally have a member that's not from California, but the vast majority of their members came from Southern California barrios.
Okay.
So that's kind of like that minor major league team you talked about earlier. That's
Mm,
their recruiting base for them. Just like the Peckerwoods and the P9 and the Nazi lowriders were for the Aryan Brotherhood, the Serenios are the recruiting pool for the Mexican Mafia. To move up, you have to become a camarada, or
mm,
literally a comrade or a associate of the Mexican Mafia. You put in work there for many, many years. Just like I said before, they're really worried about infiltrators,
right.
informants. So you have to work your way up and do a lot of stuff before you're a maid carnal. To be which is a brother in Spanish slang. To
Okay.
be a brother, a carnal, or a maid Mexican Mafia member, you have to have at least two sponsors, sometimes three sponsors, very rarely one sponsor. Though
Mm,
I know a couple of people, Joe Morgan said, "Hey, I want this guy, to join us," and nobody said squat about it. So, it was basically just his word, his heavy word. But most of the time, you have to have at least a couple sponsors or three sponsors, and then they agree amongst themselves. Yeah, this guy's in, or if there's any, so they send letters around, messages out on the tiers, huilas, they call them kites, phone calls. They get the word around about, hey, this guy, he's going to join, the team. They
mm,
might they might code it, say, hey, this guy, we got a guy who's a Dodgers fan, LA
mm.
Dodgers,
Okay. Got
that
it.
kind of stuff. And hey, what do you think about this guy? And is he any good? And people go, yeah, yay or nay, in coded message.
Right.
and and so then, yeah, the guys, if there's no objections, or at least no major objections, if there is a minor objection, they'll give him a chance to clear it up, clear his name. Hey, we heard that, you
Right.
know this or that happened. What do you got to say about that? If the guy comes up with special paperwork that clears his name, court paperwork, hey man, I didn't snitch to the cops, it's right here, it was the other guy,
Ah, I see what you're
my
saying.
crime partner, he
Okay.
snitched to the cops. I
Okay.
didn't say squat, I held my mud, and I went to prison for it. And if they accept that, then he's still in. He's still good.
Gotcha. Now, in the movie, they show that the almost character um, introduces the person. I don't remember his name in the movie, but they introduce the character that's supposed to be portraying, Joe Morgan, and he's the one who basically vouches for him. He says, "Nah, he's my dude. We grew up together, so on and so forth." Did that really happen, or did that not happen?
Well, it didn't really happen like that. Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, they did. Joe Morgan was from Shankarina, the character Santana in the movie. He grew up in Bakersfield. He was
mm,
convicted of murder, a murder in Bakersfield, but he in prison would hang around the Primera Flats guys from East LA. So
mm,
he was not from LA. Joe Morgan was from East LA, but he was from a gang called Ford Maravilla, which is a totally different gang than Primera Flats.
mm,
So I don't believe they knew each other Well, Joe Morgan was locked up all that time, so I highly doubt that he ever knew him on the streets. But in prison, everybody knew about Joe Morgan. Whites, blacks,
Okay.
Mexicans. He was a legend, like I said, even before the Mexican Mafia even started. So uh, Cadena didn't know about him, did raise his hand for him. There was other Mexican Mafia members. Also, Mike Eisen is mentioned from San Francisco as one of the guys that raised their hand for Joe Morgan. So pretty much everybody was pretty happy when Joe Morgan joined the team. You know, it's like
I
scoring
gotcha.
an
Okay.
MVP guy.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
yeah, like yeah, we got the number one guy out. You
Yeah.
know,
It's like when
that's
A-Rod
out
came to
there.
the Yankees. Yeah.
Well, yeah, kind of, yeah, good example. Yeah, yeah. It's like, all
Yeah.
right, we're gonna really hit home runs now. Yeah, we're really gonna
Right.
take it up a notch.
So let's get back to the movie American Me, because I was watching that interview with Danny Trejo, and it was a great interview, by the way. The movie comes out in 1992, and according to that interview, there were, I believe, 10 people that were killed. Six, yeah, six in prison and 10 on the outside on the street because of that movie. And from what I understand, the major scene of that movie that really got everybody up in arms is the rape scene. Actually,
That
grape.
was one.
Can't say that fucking word on YouTube for some reason, but all right, the grape scene. And they were saying no, 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 because homosexuality is no, no in the Mexican mafia, and the leader especially never got graped.
Yeah,
So
yeah. There's no evidence of that. That was one air, and he was warned by multiple people not to put that in there, but he thought it'd
Mhm.
make a more interesting movie.
Hollywood,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, Hollywood. He also the scene where the Mexican Mafia killed Shankar. Joe Morgan loved Shankar like his son. He would have never had him hit
right,
or killed, and so it was the other side. So yeah, there were some inaccuracies on that. They also had a sodomy scene where he's with a girlfriend, where like he couldn't tell the
yes,
difference. Like yeah, that's the
yes, he
third error
gets
that I know.
okay, okay,
And
all
there
right,
was three advisors and other people later, but I actually escorted Joe Morgan um, at New Folsom Prison. They brought him back for some old cases, and actually escorted him when that movie was being made, and said, "Hey, Joe, I heard they're making a movie about you." He could be very stern.
yeah,
Yeah. And I
that
said,
was
wow,
it.
I thought he'd be kind of happy. Hey, somebody's making a movie, you're
No.
going to be even more popular now. I said, well, you got paid, didn't you? He said, no, it'll be taken care of.
You know what's funny is
And
I
and
have to
that's that I knew after they killed those people what he meant.
what
I
he
didn't
meant.
know what
Yeah,
he meant at
right,
that.
right. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. You know what's funny, and correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, I knew a couple of people that got out of jail or got out of prison and so on and so forth. And to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have a lot more experience in this than I do. That's for sure. Jail kind of or prison kind of shapes you when you come out, especially for a long period of time. And I've noticed there are two different types. The very paranoid type, right? No matter where they are, even when they come out of jail, it's always right. Or like you mentioned, the Joe Morgan type, where it's just ice cold, no
Mhm.
emotion, just nothing.
Mhm.
Is that accurate, or am I just that's something that I've experienced?
Yeah, no, in prison they have a saying: you're either a predator or you're prey.
Mhm.
You know, Joe Morgan was a predator, ain't no doubt about it.
Right.
You know, he was a heavy hitter. Um, Cheyenne Canena was also uh, very intelligent in kind of a different way. Cheyenne Canena wasn't that big. Joe Morgan was a big guy.
Yeah.
Uh, he's intimidating.
Mhm.
Um, just the way he walked, the way he carried himself. Man, you can tell this guy's badass. You know what I mean? He
Right.
just
Yeah. You
he
can
had
feel
that
the
he had
energy on
that
them. Yeah.
yeah, he had that charisma about him. Like
Yeah.
you want to mess with this guy. Like I said, when I asked him those questions, he was not making me feel like I was you know,
Privy to the answer.
yeah, exactly. So I kind of let it go. Okay, I'm not going to ask no more questions. Then I'm going to let this guy go and
Yeah,
piss
yeah,
him off.
right.
I don't want to end up dead. Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
that's so funny.
you know, yeah. So Cheyenne Cadena, although I didn't meet him, I know people who did. Tony Casas, like I said, he was a smaller guy, but
Hmm.
he got to San Quentin. Somebody tried to punk him, and I understand he killed a big black guy on their yard in San Quentin just to show everybody what he was made of. And so
Well,
uh,
let me throw some names out at
he
you
was dangerous too. Yeah.
who supposedly have been uh, shot callers, and you tell me whether I'm wrong or whether there is a history with these guys. The first one is Donald Big D Garcia.
Hmm.
Have
Yeah.
you heard of
Big
him?
D,
Okay,
big. Oh yeah, I've conversed with Big D.
okay,
Big D was a boxer. He was another big guy, very intimidating, very dangerous. He ended up dropping out in the late 1970s. As I recall, he was with another Mexican Mafia member who killed his own brother,
wow.
and that I think bothered him. The Mexican Mafia comes before everything, even your own family.
Well, they portrayed that in the movie
But I
too,
think that
actually.
yeah, I think that when Big D saw that go down, that kind of bothered him, and he ended up becoming reborn Christian,
Mm.
and that's the time period I knew him. I didn't know him in prison; he's before my time, but um, he ended up never debriefing. So a lot of people still considered him, but the California Department of Corrections considers you to still be an active member if you don't go through the debriefing process, which is
Ah,
basically
I
tell
see.
them everything you know. So he'd never rolled,
Okay.
uh, but he ended up trying to help people. I think he was sincere. There's some people that say he was on an act, but I don't believe he even got charged with a parking ticket after that time period. So
Wow.
um, yeah, so what do you got to go on? Other than you didn't like the fact that he didn't roll.
Right.
He felt still some loyalty to his brothers, but he told me he wanted to help them get out of that life. So
Hmm.
I had to believe him.
Sure. The next name, Luis Buffalo Suaro. Is that accurate?
Luis, but
His nickname
Flores,
his nickname was Buffalo, I guess.
yeah,
Suarez.
yeah, Louis
Yes.
but
Yes.
Flores, yeah, Flores, yeah, yeah. He
Okay.
was the founder that I talked about. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, he
Okay.
was one of
Okay.
the main guys. He ended up dying of. Yeah, he was very active for many years. He ended up dying of. He drunk himself to death basically.
Wow. Really?
Um, yeah, so I'm pretty sure he was depressed with what the organization had become. He created that, monster, and I don't think he
Hmm.
liked what he saw it become because Mexican Mafia, just like Aryan Brotherhood, mostly kills each other. So it was supposed to be a thing about brotherhood, and I ended up just kind of going to crap.
Yeah. 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 That's it. So it seems to be the same. We've talked about this. It seems to be the same blueprint for every organized crime, gang related thing. Um, let's talk about the shoe incident or the shoe wars. That seemed to be strange. The story that I got. Actually, why don't you discuss it? It was a Mexican war in 1978. Is that accurate?
68. Mm-hmm.
68. Sorry, 68. Okay.
Yeah. Well, there was a Mexican Mafia member named Robert Robot Salas, who was from East LA, from a gang there called Hazard, a well-known barrio, Mexican American, primarily Mexican American neighborhood, the Ramona Gardens housing projects, and he had a crime partner, uh, Pieface Ortega, who stole some shoes from a guy from Northern California, Hector Mad Dog Padilla. Hector Mad Dog Padilla was a West Familia Mexicana associate, and the shoes didn't fit Pieface, so he gave them to Robot. So Robot's out there wearing the shoes out in the yard, and these are what they call bonneroos, real fancy, dress shoes you use to not to just you know work out in, but to wear to like the visiting room, special occasions.
Okay.
Um, and so they were nice shoes, and so he's wearing them, and Mad Dog sees him on the yard and said, "Hey, what are you doing wearing my shoes?" And Robot says, hey, I am, you know, and I'm sure that Padilla did know who he was,
Right.
but he felt insulted. And so later on, uh, Salas goes up to Padilla's cell and his cellie, Manuel Benito Romero, and stabs him.
Wow.
Uh, so Robot, they call him Robot because he had, what do they call it? Polio
Mm,
was real big back in the, pre 1960s, was a major epidemic in America with a lot of people. And so he walked with a limp
mm,
because of the polio, and kind of like a robot when you walk. So that's how he got that name. So Robot had killed for the Mexican Mafia prior. He was very ruthless kid, not real big either, but
mm,
very dangerous, very ruthless. And so this became a major, major dispute
mm.
that we call the shoe war today because it was a fight over a pair of shoes. Something as
Wow.
simple as that. But it spread. So later on, um, there was rioting that occurred between the two factions, and it's been going on ever since. More recently, they had a end of hostilities agreement reached between the big prison gangs, the Aryan Brotherhood, the Mexican Mafia, and West Vermilion Black Guerrilla family, and it was basically moved to get them all kicked out of the security housing units, or most of them,
Mm,
out of the lockdown that I talked about that happened in 1970 and on. When they validate these guys, they lock them down. Well, now it's a lot harder to get them locked down in
mm,
these security housing units, Pelican Bay, Corcoran, Tehachapi. Some of the other prisons have little units that are shoes, considered lockdown facilities. But yeah, for many, many years, from 68 to, wasn't that long ago, 2015, 2014, 2015, basically when the hunger strikes happened in California Department of Corrections, that's when these gangs kind of put away their differences to get kicked out, get out of 23-hour lockdown.
wow.
And now a lot of them are out there on the yards. And I think I talked about it last time. There's all this killings going on now as they all fight over, you know,
Whatever.
power and turf again. Yeah.
Right, right, right. So is that what's happening in today with the Mexican Mafia, the Aryan Nation? Today in the prison systems, are they still at war with each other, or uh, has one become less powerful than the others since the 60s and the 70s? Or is it still kind of like the same status quo?
Well, there was in the Rico case, they mentioned the Hugo Yogi Pinel case. So Yogi Pinel was a Black guerrilla family member that the Aryan Brotherhood killed, or two associates, anyways. Aryan Brotherhood ordered it. He had been on the hit list for years and years. He had been a thorn in the side of the Aryan Brotherhood. So, there is a case where supposedly there's supposed to be a truce between the prison gangs, but the Aryan Brotherhood took out one of the big shot callers for the Black guerrilla family. There's been occasionally been some disputes between the prison gangs, but surprisingly, even to authorities, the truce is held way stronger than anybody thought for like 10 years amongst the
Really?
prison gangs. But yeah, amongst the big four. However, what has happened is they've killed each other a lot.
Mm.
And they've gone against all these new prison gangs that are out there. Used to be just, four major prison gangs. Now there's a
Okay.
lot more new gangs out there fighting.
Ah,
So yeah, it is really they kind of shook up the beehive, it kind of settled down, if that makes sense, kind of the analogy of
sure.
the beehive. So there's some activity going around the beehive, but they shook it up, and now it's just nuts.
That's unbelievable. It really is. It's absolutely unbelievable. A couple more questions, then I'm going to let you go, Gabe. I was at work last week, and the guys were like, "Oh, you got anybody interesting coming on the show?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I got a great guy. He wrote a book about the Mexican Mafia. He's coming on. He's going to talk about the Mexican Mafia." Majority of the guys that I work with are younger, maybe in their 30s, someone in their 20s, and they're like, "The Mexican Mafia, isn't that just the Mexican drug cartels?" And I was like, "No, there's a big difference." But then it got to me. Do the drug cartels use the Mexican Mafia to get things done, like maybe sling dope, drugs, or anything else within the states?
Absolutely. I mentioned Joe Morgan before had ties to the drug cartels down in
Mm,
Mexico. So, yeah, they have been having drug cartel connections since the 1970s. And it just actually it increased. If anything, increased. There are even a few Mexican mafia members that are from Mexico.
really?
I remember one Chino Padua in particular is from Mexico City. Uh,
Mm,
and so, yeah, they increased ties. I also had a guy in my unit at Folsom called Fox Tapia. He worked with the Familia Michoacana, the Michoacan drug cartel there,
mm,
um, and the Templarios. There's another group out of Michoacan. He worked with both of those. They have worked with the Sinaloa cartel. They have worked with the Jalisco, the new Jalisco. They call them
mm.
Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, the new generation Jalisco cartel. All the major ones they have worked with down there. That's how they get a lot of their dope to sell in the streets.
I
And
see.
so then they will sell it, yeah, via their connections, sell it to street gang members. They even sell to Mexican Mafia is the main connection for a lot of the black gangs and black
Ah,
drug dealers. You know,
okay.
yeah, because if they got the money, they'll put all differences aside.
Yeah, absolutely.
Money,
Yeah, yeah.
money is the great, yeah, equalizer.
Yeah, that's so funny. One more question, Gabe, and I just this is mostly out of curiosity. In that movie, American Me, there are connections with the Italian mafia on the West Coast during the 1960s. And there's a scene where Santana gets out of prison and they're driving with Joe Morgan. And he says, the Italians are still in charge, but they're getting sloppy. And they try to talk to them about taking over a piece of the drugs in the street. And there's all this killings and there's overdoses, intentional overdoses and so on and so forth. Did that actually happen? Was there any truth to that?
Well, again, he kind of played with made a lot of Hollywood out of it. There was some things that are true. They did do deals with the Italian mafia, Joe Morgan in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Champ Reynoso, who's a good friend of Joe Morgan. Champ Reynoso was the number one guy, or considered to be the number one guy in the federal system. And yeah, he also had connections with uh, Jimmy the Weasel Fratiano, and they had connections via Mike Delia Sr. I know the Delia family. His nephew actually was a major cop that worked with my mentor and bringing down Joe Morgan. So yeah, they definitely had Italian mafia ties. It's in my book. I talk quite a bit about. Well, I should say talk quite a bit. I talk some about some of those connections there. So
Okay.
yes, it did occur. It was a great exaggeration in the movie how they put it out.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
there's scenes there where they shot it up with the I think they call them the Cowboys. It's supposed to be the Aryan Brotherhood. They've had some beefs with the Aryan Brotherhood, but it didn't go down like that, like they showed in the movie. There was a lot of Hollywood in that movie, but there was also based on some real stuff too. So
Right, 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 right.
it wasn't total BS, but a lot of Hollywood. Um, there's another movie, Blood In Blood Out, that a lot of people
Yes.
think is more was better. The Mexican Mafia didn't have a problem with
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
movie
yeah.
because it was all they made up, fictitious names and stuff. But a lot of people feel that's more uh, a
Accurate.
better movie. Yeah, more. Well, yeah. I guess this thing is a better movie. I guess the Mexican Mafia does, anyways, because they didn't, mess with the facts in
Oh,
that
I
movie. They
see.
made it
Okay.
real. They made it obvious that it's fiction,
Yeah,
whereas almost kind of trying to make it seem like this is, a lot more
yeah.
factual than it really was. If
Right,
that
yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And Danny Trejo is in that movie, Blood In, Blood Out. Listen, Gabe, always a pleasure having you on, man. Really, really is interesting. Always interesting. Fantastic. Why don't you plug your podcast? 'Cause you have a great podcast too, actually.
Sure. It's Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians. And on that podcast, I've covered all the big California prison gangs. I'm getting ready to do a series on bikers. I've done drug cartels. I've done most of the major crime groups. I haven't done the Costa Nostra, so maybe
Oh,
you can help me out on that one. Maybe that would,
absolutely. I could no
yeah.
question about it. Yeah.
Been
Whenever
wanting
you're
to
ready,
do
just let
some.
me know.
Yeah. I've been wanting to do more East Coast stuff. People have been asking for it, so I'm a West Coast guy. Live out in Hawaii now, so I'm very good with the West Coast. I'm familiar with some of the Chicago stuff, a little bit of the East
Right.
Coast stuff, but I usually go to other sources out there that I consider to be the real experts out there.
Yeah, let me know. Absolutely. You just tell me because there's a lot to the Italian mafia on the East Coast. You tell me what exactly you want to talk about, and I have no problem coming on. I'll even put you in touch with some of these guys that are out of prison that you could interview. The only thing is they all want free. They all want to get paid. That's the only thing. Yeah, they all say they
Yeah,
change. They all say they change their ways until money comes into the
yeah,
equation, and
yes.
that's unbelievable. Yeah, unreal. Gabe, thank you very much, brother. I really appreciate it. And here is the book once again, The History of the Mexican Mafia. You can get it on Amazon. It will be in the description. The link will be in the description. His other book, The History of the Aryan Brotherhood, the link will also be in the description. It is always a pleasure to have you, Gabe. Check out his podcast, Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians. Gabe, thank you, and God bless you. I really appreciate you coming on, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you
All
for
right, have
having
a
me
good
on.
night.